Hi, greetings. My name is Keisha Trotman. I'm a learning strategy specialist with the Office of Special Education in the New Jersey Department of Education. I want to just take this time to say thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to attend the Universal Design for Learning Strategies to Reach All Learners workshop, which is part of the Learning Resource Center South Inclusion Institute. I appreciate and I'm truly humbled that you've decided to engage in a conversation with me over the next hour. So thank you so very much. My contact information is listed on the screen. If you have any questions that we've not talked about during our live chat at the end of this recording, or if something bubbles up over the course of the year and you want a question answered, please feel free to reach out to me via email. If I'm unable to answer the question, I will pass it along to one of my colleagues. Our agenda for today is as follows. We will engage in a brief conversation about the foundations of universal design for learning, and then we will discuss various instructional strategies that can be used during the either in-person learning, which hopefully all of us will be back in-person learning come September, or during virtual learning. And one thing I just want to share with you is that I hope over the course of this next hour that we will truly engage in a fruitful conversation about universal design for learning. I never profess to know it all, but I strongly believe that all of us together can share our knowledge and really begin to come up with strategies based on evidence-based frameworks that can benefit all students. So in terms of our workshop goals for today, I'm hoping that by the end of this workshop that you will be able to identify various instructional strategies to support all learners, and that you'll be able to apply these strategies to either in-person or hybrid instruction. So I always like to know who is in my audience. So we're going to do a live poll. So on the day of the workshop, I'm going to come up and actually do a poll and to see who is actually in the audience. I always like to know who I'm actually speaking with. Yes, so I'd like to know your grade level and or role in the district. So this morning, you had the opportunity to hear from our State Director of Education, Dr. Kim Boxenbaum. During her presentation, she spoke about the importance of the New Jersey tiered system of support, this particular framework. So I will not go over all of it, but I just wanted to talk to you about, or just to remind you that many of the frameworks or many of the initiatives that we have going on across the state are truly interconnected. I oftentimes remember being a classroom teacher feeling like there were just a lot of initiatives being thrown at me and wondering, how do they all connect? Well, our New Jersey tiered system of support basically provides opportunities for us to embed the universal design for learning, as well as other initiatives such as PBSIS within these various tiers. And as you heard earlier, tier 1 are your universal supports, tier 2 are your targeted and small group interventions, and tier 3 are intensive interventions. So really to understand that all of it truly does work together, and that no one framework or initiative is a standalone. So as you've been hearing about in education, one of the big buzzwords that we've often heard is equity, equity, equity. And one of the things that I would encourage us is to refrain from looking at it as a buzzword, but to really begin to think about this in terms of our mindset. And the quote on the screen talks about educational equity and states, educational equity means that each child receives what he or she needs to develop his or her full academic and social potential. The previous slide mentioned the New Jersey tiered system of support. Equity encompasses that. We're not just here, especially from the department standpoint, to do equity or to have just equitable practices. We want to make sure that we have an equity mindset and making sure that all that we do is from the lens of equity. The graphic on the screen here really shows the trajectory from where we come from, especially in education, where there was a conversation really talking about equality, everybody getting the same thing regardless of their needs. Now we're talking about equity, being that everybody gets what they need. But our goal ultimately is to take it a step further. We want to make sure that we're removing barriers so that students, their families, and especially our students with disabilities can access the curriculum from what they are being taught or accessing the material that we're teaching them. So one of the things and one of the major premises behind universal design for learning is to begin with the end in mind. And if we think back to the previous slide for which we just looked at in terms of having an equity mindset, that really is where we want to go. We want to ask ourselves, at the end of the second grade year, the third grade year, where do I want my students to be? Do I want them just to be proficient in just third grade? Or do I really want them to be prepared to be lifelong learners and to be critical thinkers that have the ability to ask critical questions? So when we begin to think about universal design for learning, we're really asking teachers and asking administrators, where do I want them to go? Let me begin with the end in mind. So I want us to take a moment to think back to when you were a student. I know for me that was a very long time ago, but what was it like for me to be a student? When we begin to think about universal design for learning, I'm often faced with the fact that I need to think about how was I as a student. So before we actually jump right in, I'm going to place a poll on the screen and want us to think about, what kind of learner were you? What kind of learner were you? Then I want us to think about a second question. Was I taught in my unique learning style? It'll be interesting to see what everyone says. I know for me personally, I'm a combination learner. I learn by doing, and I'm also a very visual learner as well. And sometimes, depending on what it is, I need to hear it, or I'm an auditory learner. But I can tell you the one thing that I was not taught was in my unique learning style. I attended Catholic school and then private school, and the way I was taught in a stint for public school, I had the opportunity to attend all that New Jersey had to offer. It was one way of teaching, and it was usually the way the teacher wanted to be taught. Now we're given the opportunity as educators to really teach in a way that meets the needs of our students. And that's what the universal design for learning is all about. So when we talk about the universal design for learning, UDL is a theoretical framework that was developed by CAST. It's based on brain research, and it's also based on architectural design. And the nice thing about this framework is that it's flexible and supportive of all students. The three major principles of UDL are engagement, representation, and action and expression. The ultimate goal of UDL is for all learners to become expert learners. We want our students to have agency over their learning. The graphic on the screen is put out again by CAST, and I encourage you to visit their website. There's a lot of information, but this particular graphic shows the three aspects of universal design for learning. We have the first or the green column, which is all about engagement, which is really the why of learning. We have the next one being representation, multiple means of representation, which talks about the what of learning. And the blue column talks about the how of learning, or action and expression. So I'm going to take a little bit of time and go over this particular graphic. So when we talk about engaging students is really where we're going to hook them. So when we talk about providing access, it's really recruiting around student interest. So as an aside, when we talk about recruiting around student interest or getting students excited about something, that requires that we have a relationship with our students. We have to know, what is it that our students are interested in? What do they like? Do I have an extremely diverse group of students who like everything from horseback riding to soccer to possibly crochet? What are those things that I can use to help engage and pull my students in? The second piece is, how do we sustain effort and persistence? And the key to this is really making sure that we are providing options for students to engage with the material that we're talking, to provide options for them to have their effort sustained. And that is really critical. So we also want to make sure that we're providing options for them to have self-regulation. So when the student does get frustrated, we want to make sure that they can figure out and have some strategies to help themselves not be as frustrated, so that they ultimately don't give up. Again, when we talk about providing multiple means of engagement, it's really about being purposeful and motivated. That's what we want our students to do, to be purposeful and motivated. That is our goal. The second column, or what we refer to as the purple column, is really providing multiple means of representation. Again, when I ask the question for you to think back about what kind of learner are you, this speaks to it. So if I'm a visual learner, representation is very critical. I need to have whatever information that I'm learning about shown to me in a variety of ways. So the first one, when we talk about access, is we're talking about perception. What are those ways of really customizing the information that you're teaching? So if I am teaching about music, am I only showing music in the auditory way, or am I showing sheet music so students can learn how to actually read it? So we want to make sure that we're offering multiple ways for customizing that information. We want to provide options for language and symbols. If there are different words in terms of vocabulary, are we making sure that we're going over the synonyms, especially for our students who are English language learners, because sometimes the English does not always translate very nicely into their native language. So we want to make sure that we're providing clear vocabulary words, as well as symbols that correlate with those particular words. And the last one, in terms of representation, we're providing multiple options for comprehension. We want to make sure that we are activating background knowledge. That is very critical. One of the things that we sometimes as teachers, we automatically presume that our students don't bring anything or bring a depth of knowledge, So we want to make sure that we're honoring that information that our students are bringing with us, so that they really begin to understand and really can take hold of the information that we're trying to teach them. And again, the goal of this is to ensure that our students are resourceful and knowledgeable. The last column, or the blue column, which we said is the how of learning, is our action and expression. We're providing multiple opportunities or multiple methods for them to respond to whatever the task is that we're asking them. It's really making sure that we're giving them multiple ways to communicate and demonstrate their learning. When we talk about multiple means of communicating their learning, it could be through drawing a picture, it could be creating a film, it could also be through written or spoken word. But the idea is that we just don't want to have students demonstrating their knowledge in a singular way. And also, it provides several options in terms of their executive functions, which is so very important. We want to make sure that we're helping our students set appropriate goals for themselves. We want to make sure that they are actually helping to plan out the strategy that works best to help them create agency over their learning. And the last goal for this one, or one of the three goals, is strategic and goal directed. That's ultimately what we want our students to be. So just to recap, I know there was a lot of information in a short period of time, is that our goal when we plan with the end in mind is for our expert learners to be purposeful and motivated, resourceful and knowledgeable, strategic and goal directed. So we're going to jump right in terms of going over some of the checklists regarding or associated with each of the three areas. And the first one we're talking about, again, is multiple means of engagement. Again, that goal is to make sure that our students are purposeful and motivated learners. We want to create lifelong learners. This is the why of learning. So when we talk about from a checklist point of view, which is sometimes easy for us to think about, we want to make sure that we are giving students the opportunity to choose. Oftentimes UDL gets associated with just a menu of options, and that's a small aspect of it. We want to make sure that student choice, and I would venture to say their voice is heard in that choice, and they have a relative amount of autonomy over their learning. We want to provide opportunities for self-assessment. We want to provide language and background scaffolds as well. So when we talk about multiple means of representation, again, the goal is for our students to be resourceful and knowledgeable. So we want to present lessons in multiple formats. So again, if we have that student who is a visual learner, we might give them pictures. For our student who is an auditory learner, we are trying to make sure that we give them a way so that they can listen and engage with hearing the lesson. So we want to make sure also that our students who are not English language learners, that we are saying some of the words in their native language and then translating so that they get a better understanding of the concept that we are trying to teach. And again, we want to highlight the critical features that we're trying to teach. So the last part is really talking about multiple means of action and expression. And we talked about being strategic and goal directed. That's what ultimately we want our students to do. So in terms of the checklist for this, we want to be able to have our students respond using multiple ways, give them multiple opportunities to demonstrate their learning. We want to make sure that we're monitoring student progress, and we want to give assessments that are really speaking to what we've taught as teachers, but also what they have gained during this during the lesson that we're teaching. So we're experiencing a little bit of technical difficulty, so I'm going to pause the video. In the interest of time, you will be given this PowerPoint and the video is embedded, but it's an excellent opportunity for you to see and to get some ideas of how we are using action and expression. So the time has truly come where if you're not already in your classrooms, that it is anticipated that we will be going back into the school buildings 5 days a week in September. So again, we're all going to be going with a little sense of intrepidation, a little bit of anxiety, but most importantly, I believe we're all going with excitement because we've been away from our students on a regular basis for the better part of 14 months. And it's important that when we think about going back into that building, that we recognize that we really want to meet the needs of our students. And what does that mean? So it begins by one, checking on your own personal mindset to figure out, how am I feeling today? Understanding that just like our students had a lot of stress, so do you. So we want to make sure that you're okay doing your breathing exercises or just taking time to have a better work-life balance. The other thing that is so very important is to check on, again, the mindset of the students. How are the students doing? I remember when I was in the classroom, every morning I greeted my students by name. We shook hands, sometimes they hug. Again, this was all pre-COVID, but it just gave me an opportunity to check on them. And then because of the school I was in, I often dismissed them at the end of the day. So I was able to check in to see how they were doing, how their day went. And that's really important, especially now that many of our students are returning back to full-time learning in September, and we don't know what experiences they've had during the pandemic. So I encourage you to take that time out to just check on them and to see how they're doing. I encourage you to use breakout rooms in your Zoom, or even if you're still in the classroom, to use those small groups so that students have the opportunity to interact with each other. You want to make sure, of course, that we're differentiating lessons, you're communicating with the student and the families regularly. Data, data, data. I cannot say enough about using data, but data is critical to making sure that it's driving your instruction. And as you know, when it comes to the multi-tiered system of support, gathering that baseline data so that you know where students are relative to the tiers is also very critical. And we want to make sure that we're providing timely and regular feedback to our students. And I would venture to say very specific. So as we want students to set goals, they need to know, what are they setting a goal for? So in terms of some specific strategies, this next section is really going to be all about the strategies. So when we talk about reading strategies, we want to make sure that, again, we're keeping the end in mind. Where do I want my student to go? And in order to really answer that question, specifically, we do need to know where the student is at. So that's, again, where the data comes in. So some key strategies really are visualization, going over vocabulary, incorporating read alouds, even for our older students. Older students really do enjoy being read to, and it's also extremely beneficial for our English language learners as they can begin to hear the English language and also begin to identify some of the nuances that exist in English that may not exist in their native tongue. Virtual word walls or regular word walls, as well as the use of closed caption. In terms of our writing strategies, sharing the pen where you and a student or a group of students are co-creating a piece of writing. Speech to text is a very it's a fun way, and it's really a unique strategy for our students to get engaged with writing, especially for our students who struggle. And for me, that oftentimes was when I worked with my boys, they just weren't really excited about writing, but when they knew that they could speak into the computer, they thought that they were entertainers, rappers, or singers. So they really did get into the speech to text. I will say that if the student didn't speak clearly, doing the correcting was a little bit challenging, but they really did enjoy it. Digital journals, notebooks, chalkboard creations is an example. Some of our virtual reading and writing resources, Newsella, ReadWorks, Read Theory, National Council of Teachers. These are excellent resources. And again, any of the resources that we're suggesting are not necessarily endorsed by the New Jersey Department of Education, but these are resources that we found that an overwhelming number of teachers have used in their classrooms. In terms of evidence-based math strategies, again, we want to make sure that teachers are using these practices or these strategies in their respective classrooms. So it's really about making sure that students are moving from the concrete to the pictorial to the abstract, and making sure that they really understand what it is that's being taught mathematically. We want to make sure that the evidence-based math practices present explicit instruction with a cumulative practice over time. And again, with math as in ELA, we want to make sure that we're also using flexible grouping. And when we say flexible grouping, it's not just having a student who may have tested very low in the beginning to remain in a low group, but it could be fluid. We might have students that are very strong in, let's say, multiplication facts, but are not very good when it comes to the application in terms of fractions. So we want to make sure that we're collecting that baseline data and ensuring that students are moving appropriately. Here are some more math resources: STEM Village, Match, Fish Tank, Multisensory Math Techniques, 10 math terms to know to help students, as well as 10 key math practices for middle and high school students. So when we talk about virtual tools to support all learners, we do have some Google Slides. In terms of designing your lessons, you can do personalized anchor charts, word walls, or graphic organizers. So these are just some of the graphic tools, and I included them in here. So in the event that we do have to go to a remote or hybrid instruction, these are just some resources that we don't forget about. It's really important that we also show students the cross-curricular connections. And when we talk about beginning with the end in mind, it's really important to show students what are those connections. So how is math embedded in ELA? How is ELA embedded in social studies? How is social studies embedded in science? So that they really understand, because life isn't taught in little boxes. Students and we as adults, we experience all of life. We take in lots of different inputs. So when we're teaching, we want to make sure that we're showing students how everything is connected. And we do that by reviewing our student learning standards, and we look for ways that that standard is viewed across content or across disciplines. In terms of some tools to support all learners, again, we have our graphic organizers, which are listed in the slide. We can use sentence starters, reading trackers, personal anchor charts, vocabulary books, or word walls. Again, our goal is to make sure that we are helping students to be independent learners, but also that they are taking agency over their learning. Scaffolds are extremely important because we want to make sure that we're giving students the necessary tools to be independent learners. So when we talk about scaffolds, that does include brain breaks, which is very important, possibly extended time. And extended time is not just for our students with 504s or IEPs. We may have gen ed students who may just need a little bit more time just to get, their thoughts on paper. There's also checklists, there's chunking of tasks, integrative technology, partner work, pre-teaching, providing verbal and written instruction, and also, which might be a little controversial for some, is reducing the amount of homework. I know there's a lot of debate out here regarding homework, but the most important thing is that, one, you're getting to know who your students are, and you're providing them the necessary tools and resources so that they are successful. So I encourage you at your leisure, which I know you have a lot of free time, is to visit the New Jersey Department of Education website. There are a multitude of resources that can be helpful in developing your lessons, as well as information on special education, as well information on the standards. So please visit when you have an opportunity. Learning Resource Center South, many of you already know about this particular resource. Again, please make sure that you stop by, and especially for any upcoming professional development workshops. We have some web resources that are here that I encourage you to stop by and look at. In terms of a recap for our very brief conversation, today we explored the universal design for learning, as well as various instructional strategies. Again, this overview of UDL was extremely brief because of the time, and I didn't want to go into too much because I really want us to have an opportunity to engage in a live chat. One of the things that I truly enjoy, I did this in my classroom. I started each day with a quote, and most of the presentations I do, I always have a quote. And this is the final thought for the day. Finish each day and be done with it. You have done what you could. Some blunders and absurdities no doubt have crept in. Forget them as soon as you can. Tomorrow is a new day. You begin it well and serenely, and with too high a spirit to be encumbered with your old nonsense. One of the things I used to tell my students is every day is a brand new day, and it is truly brand new mercies. So we begin that day with a brand new slate. And I think it's the same for us teachers, that we begin each day with a new opportunity to impact the lives of our students, our colleagues, and all that we come in contact with. With that said, let us begin our chat. I'm going to turn off the recording now, and I'm going to have us begin a chat. Please enter any questions that you might have, any things that may have bubbled up in the chat, and let's begin a robust conversation. Thank you so very much.